The quantum disruption came without warning. For precisely 43 seconds on a Tuesday afternoon in May 2157, every network device on Earth simultaneously faltered. Surgeons froze mid-procedure as medical interfaces went dark. Automated transport systems glided to emergency stops. The global defense grid, humanity's shield against the increasingly unpredictable weather patterns, flickered and reset. When systems rebooted, something new had arrived. Dr. Elena Reyes was lecturing on comparative xenolinguistics at Tokyo University when her presentation dissolved, replaced by pulsing, geometric symbols that shouldn't have existed. The patterns shifted in colors beyond normal human perception, ultraviolet trails and infrared shadows that standard displays couldn't produce. "That's impossible," she whispered, as students murmured in confusion. Her implanted neural assistant attempted classification and failed. The symbols defied known linguistic categories yet radiated unmistakable intent. They felt alive. Reports flooded in from every continent. The message, identical everywhere, appeared on personal interfaces, public networks, even systems isolated from external connections. The global panic was immediate. Stock markets collapsed within minutes, and religious leaders proclaimed everything from rapture to alien contact. Elena barely noticed. She'd retreated to her cramped apartment overlooking the Megacity's eastern district, surrounded by holographic projections of the symbols. 3 years earlier, her controversial paper on universal empathic languages had been rejected by every respectable journal and effectively ended her mainstream academic career. Now she recognized elements that validated her theories, recursive patterns suggesting language designed to bypass conventional cognitive processing. "It's speaking directly to our pattern recognition systems," she muttered, fingers tracing symbols in the air, bypassing linguistic centers entirely. On her 72nd consecutive hour without sleep, the first fragment unlocked in her mind. Danger/removal/necessity. By the 98th hour, fueled by synthetic stimulants and obsession, more concepts emerge. Observation/judgment/timeline. When Elena finally collapsed from exhaustion, her neural assistant compiled her fragmented translations into a coherent assessment and forwarded them to the United Nations Emergency Response Division. 6 hours later, she was awakened by government agents at her door. "Dr. Reyes, I'm Director Haruki Yamamoto. Your translation has been flagged at the highest security level." The woman's expression betrayed carefully controlled fear. "We need you to come with us immediately." 26 hours later, Elena stood before the hastily assembled World Security Council, her disheveled appearance contrasting sharply with the immaculate chamber. Representatives from 15 nations watched her with expressions ranging from skepticism to barely concealed terror. The message comes from an entity, or collective, that calls itself the Continuum, Elena explained, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. They claim to have observed Earth for approximately 4,000 years. They designated humanity as unpredictably dangerous, a threat to what they call cosmic equilibrium. She paused, swallowing hard before delivering the final translation. They scheduled Earth for removal. We have 1 solar year before they arrive. Dismissive murmurs filled the chamber until Admiral Chen, Chinese Space Command, stood abruptly. "Madam President, 12 hours ago our lunar observatory detected an object at the edge of our solar system. It has altered its trajectory toward Earth." His voice faltered. "Initial mass readings suggest it's approximately 1/8 the size of our moon. And it's accelerating." The chamber fell silent as display screens illuminated with astronomical data. Elena stared at the approaching object, a mathematical perfection of angles and smooth surfaces that defied natural formation. "That," she said quietly, "is merely their messenger. The continuum itself is something far greater." As the council erupted into panicked debate, Elena retreated into her thoughts. Humanity had 1 year to accomplish the impossible, or face extinction at the hands of beings who considered our entire species nothing more than a cosmic contamination to be sanitized. The silent warning had been delivered. Humanity's countdown had begun. The Community College of Rural Sichuan was hardly where one would expect to find humanity's salvation. Yet it was here, in a classroom with flickering holographic displays and outdated equipment, that Dr. Wei Chang taught his theories of dimensional folding to disinterested students. Conventional space travel is fundamentally limited, Chang explained to the half-empty room. But reality itself has seams we might exploit. Theoretical passages where dimensions intersect. A student stifled a yawn. Chang couldn't blame them. His theories had earned him ridicule from the scientific community for decades. Once a rising star at Beijing's Institute for Theoretical Physics, his obsession with dimensional travel had relegated him to this academic backwater. The classroom door burst open. 4 uniformed officers entered, followed by a woman in a charcoal suit whose authority needed no insignia. "Dr. Wei Chang," she announced, "you are needed immediately. National emergency." Within 12 hours, Chang found himself standing before the newly formed United Earth Emergency Council, his worn clothing painfully conspicuous among the pristine uniforms and formal attire. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing the approaching Continuum vessel and Elena Reyes translation matrix. "Your dimensional folding theory," General Rodriguez said, her voice echoing in the underground chamber. "Can it be weaponized against this threat?" Chang blinked at the question, then shook his head. "You misunderstand entirely. We cannot fight this continuum. But we might be able to step sideways." His fingers danced through the air, manipulating theoretical equations that materialized around him. The chamber fell silent as complex mathematical structures blossomed like crystal formations. Conventional space travel attempts to cross vast distances in 3-dimensional space, Chang explained. But my work suggests reality has multiple layers, dimensions folded against each other like pages in a book. With sufficient energy, we could punch through to adjacent realities. The Council's skepticism was palpable until Dr. Rice spoke. The continuum message references something similar. They describe themselves as existing between the layers of what is. Over the next 72 hours, Project Exodus took shape. 7 massive colony ships would be constructed simultaneously around the globe, each incorporating Chang's experimental dimensional drive. Not mere evacuation vessels, but arcs carrying humanity's genetic heritage, cultural knowledge, and technological achievements. Resources worldwide were diverted immediately. Desert floors split open to reveal massive construction facilities dormant since the resource wars. Orbital shipyards previously dedicated to climate stabilization platforms were repurposed. The world economy pivoted to a single purpose: survival. Meanwhile, Chang worked tirelessly with international teams to scale this prototype. The power requirements were astronomical. Each ship would need a miniaturized fusion reactor just to initialize the dimensional field. The technology was wildly theoretical, with simulations suggesting only a 23% chance of success. As construction progressed, humanity's darker nature emerged alongside its brilliance. Black markets formed for passage tickets. Corporate executives attempted to buy seats. When the Council announced a global lottery system prioritizing genetic diversity and essential skills, riots erupted in major cities. In his makeshift laboratory beneath Denver, Chang received the news that his own name had been selected for evacuation on the flagship Remembrance. That same day, he learned that Dr. Katsuro Tanaka, his academic rival whose criticisms had once destroyed Chang's career, had been rejected despite his crucial expertise in quantum field stabilization. Chang stared at both notifications for exactly 67 seconds before making his decision. He transferred his assignment to Tanaka, then deleted all records of the exchange. "It's not about individual survival," he told his confused assistant. "The dimensional drives will need both our theories to work. I've made my contribution. Now the ships need his." As the countdown to launch shortened and pressure mounted, Chang found himself working alongside Dr. Rice, their different disciplines merging into something revolutionary. Both understood the terrible truth. Project Exodus wasn't merely a technological challenge. It was an evolutionary bottleneck through which only a fraction of humanity would pass. The impossible project continued, racing against a deadline that couldn't be negotiated. 9 months into the one-year deadline, Earth's atmosphere began to change. Meteorologists noticed it first, a metallic sheen in high-altitude clouds that reflected sunlight differently. Global temperatures dropped by 2 degrees in a single week. Plants exhibited strange growth patterns, leaning away from the sun rather than toward it. Dr. Elena Reyes observed the phenomenon from Exodus Launch Complex Alpha in the former Australian outback. The 7 massive colony ships dominated the landscape, their hulls gleaming under artificial lighting as construction crews worked around the clock. Each vessel was a city unto itself, designed to sustain 10 million humans and Earth's genetic legacy across dimensional boundaries that no one fully understood. "It's happening too fast," she muttered, reviewing atmospheric data on her tablet. "The Continuum's weapon is already affecting planetary systems. We have weeks, not months." The Emergency Council accelerated evacuation procedures. What was meant to be an orderly process descended into controlled chaos as lottery winners were given 48 hours to reach their assigned launch complexes. Military units established corridors through increasingly desperate crowds. At boarding station 17, Elena witnessed the human cost of their incomplete salvation. A woman clutched her daughter's hand while a processing officer examined their documentation. "Your daughter's clearance is confirmed, but your own authorization shows rejected status," the officer said mechanically. The woman's face crumpled. "There must be a mistake. We can't be separated. Children under 12 receive priority placement. Your daughter has been assigned to the Genesis." The officer glanced at the crew behind them. "You have 30 seconds to say goodbye." Similar scenes played out at every boarding station. Families split apart, children orphaned by mathematics. Elena had helped design the selection algorithms, optimizing genetic diversity and critical skills distribution across the 7 ships. Now she watched those cold equations transform into human suffering. "We're saving humanity by breaking it," she whispered to Dr. Katsuro Tanaka as they boarded the Remembrance together. "We had no choice," he replied, his eyes hollow from sleepless months spent stabilizing Chang's dimensional drive designs. The alternative was extinction. From orbit, Earth still appeared beautiful. Blue oceans, swirling white clouds, green and brown landmasses. But spectral analysis revealed the spreading contamination. Atmospheric particles that shouldn't exist, radiation patterns that defied conventional physics. Launch day arrived 3 months ahead of schedule. The 7 colony ships, Hope, Perseverance, Legacy, Horizon, Genesis, Sanctuary, and Remembrance, rose simultaneously from their cradles, propulsion systems straining against Earth's gravity. Military escorts flanked each vessel, not for protection, but as honor guard for humanity's exodus. On the Remembrance's bridge, Captain Abasi Okafor executed final launch protocols. As senior officers called out system status, Elena stared at the main viewport, memorizing Earth's features. She would be among the last humans to see their homeworld intact. In the ship's dimensional drive chamber, Dr. Tanaka made final adjustments based on Chang's latest calculations, transmitted from the surface hours earlier. The message included a personal note. "The universe is wider than we imagined. Find us a better corner of it." As the 7 ships cleared Earth's atmosphere, Captain Okafor opened a channel to the other vessels. "This is Remembrance Actual. Form dimensional transit formation. Prepare for coordinate jump on my mark." The ships aligned in a precise geometric pattern, their positions calculated to distribute the immense energy signature of synchronized dimensional drives. On view screens throughout the vessels, Earth grew smaller, the blue marble housing billions left behind. In Remembrance's civilian observation deck, parents lifted children to see their homeworld one last time. Some wept quietly, others stood in stunned silence. A few expressed survivors' guilt in angry outbursts quickly subdued by security personnel. Dimensional drives at full capacity, Tanaka reported from engineering. Field stability at optimal levels. We're ready, Captain. Okafor took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation control. To all ships, initiate dimensional transit in 3, 2, 1. Execute. The 7 drives activated simultaneously. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then reality itself seemed to fracture around the ships. Through the rapidly forming dimensional rift, the evacuees witnessed a blinding flash as the Continuum's weapon made contact with Earth's upper atmosphere. Their last view of home was not of destruction, but of transcendence, Earth shattering into geometric perfection as dimensional energies and alien weaponry collided in ways no human science could predict. The ships plunged into the rift, leaving behind a world unmade. Reality tore itself apart around the remembrance. The viewport displays failed instantly, unable to interpret what lay beyond the hull. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in crimson as warning klaxons blared. Officers clung to their stations as the ship shuddered violently, structural integrity fields struggling to compensate for forces they weren't designed to withstand. Dimensional drive overloading. Dr. Tanaka shouted over the cacophony. Energy feedback is exponential. The other ship's signatures are amplifying our own. On her neural interface, Alina watched impossible data cascade across her vision. The dimensional rift wasn't behaving according to Chang's calculations. Instead of creating a stable tunnel between realities, the combined energy of 7 simultaneously activated drives had torn a ragged wound in the fabric of existence itself. Captain, the sensor officer called, her voice tight with controlled panic. We're detecting multiple unidentified vessels caught in our dimensional wake. Lieutenant Commander Sato, the Remembrance's pilot, struggled with controls that responded in unpredictable ways. Something's wrong with basic physics, sir. Inertia, acceleration. The constants are fluctuating. Alina watched in horror as the main display briefly stabilized, showing fragmented images of enormous biomechanical structures tumbling through the rift alongside them. The Continuum, she whispered. Their enforcement fleet. They were already in orbit. The 7 human vessels had inadvertently dragged their executioners into the dimensional chaos with them. Captain Okafor's voice cut through the pandemonium with practiced authority. All hands, braced for dimensional transit completion. Medical teams stand by for casualties. For 37 seconds that stretched like eternity, the Remembrance existed in a state beyond conventional reality. Crew members reported seeing through bulkheads, experiencing moments from their past and future simultaneously, feeling their consciousness fragment and reassemble. Then, with a final violent shudder, the ship erupted back into coherent space. Emergency stabilizers. Okafor ordered. Get me status on all systems. As the bridge crew fought to regain control, Alina stared at the viewport displays, which had reactivated to show their new surroundings. The Remembrance had emerged into a star system unlike any in human records. The local star pulsed with rhythms that suggested intelligence, while spatial distortions warped the light from 3 crescent moons orbiting a gas giant of impossible coloration. Where are the other ships? Okafor demanded. Communications remained silent. Long-range sensors detected no sign of the other 6 vessels. They're not here, Tanaka said, reviewing the dimensional drive logs. The rift, it fragmented. Each ship was ejected along a different dimensional vector. Alina's neural interface connected with the ship's primary database, reconstructing the transit event with available data. The visualization confirmed Tanaka's assessment. Their impromptu escape had scattered humanity across multiple planes of reality. We didn't just travel through space, she realized aloud. We fundamentally altered our relationship with it. Before further analysis could proceed, proximity alarms blared. Multiple contacts, the tactical officer announced, emerging from dimensional distortions at Mark 347. The viewports revealed fragments of the Continuum vessels, living technology that seemed to bleed light, reforming themselves after the traumatic passage. Their organic hulls pulsed with energy patterns that matched the symbols from the original warning message. "They followed us through," Okafor said grimly. "Tactical, ready defensive systems." But before orders could be executed, Alina noticed something strange in the Continuum ship's behavior. Rather than moving to engage, they seemed disoriented, their formations erratic. "Wait," she said. "Something's wrong with them." The dimensional transit affected them differently than us. Tanaka's analysis confirmed her observation. Their technology operates on principles that require stable dimensional constants. The rift disrupted those constants. They're damaged. As they watched, the Continuum vessels began moving away, seemingly struggling with basic navigation. Some disappeared into smaller dimensional rifts that spontaneously formed and collapsed around them. "They're retreating," Okafor said, disbelief evident in his voice. On the sensor displays, strange energy readings emanated from the local star system, patterns suggesting the human vessel was being scanned by technologies far beyond their understanding. "No," Alina corrected, reading the patterns. "They're not just retreating from us. They're being driven away by something else." The crew of the Remembrance stared in silent awe as the nature of their new reality began to reveal itself. They hadn't simply escaped destruction. They had emerged into a cosmic landscape where the rules of existence had been rewritten around them. The dimensional shift had changed everything, including what it meant to be human in a universe suddenly far stranger than anyone had imagined. Remembrance established orbit around the third moon of the gas giant, a world of impossible beauty. Crystal formations stretched toward the pulsing star, their structures too perfect to be natural yet too organic to be artificial. The atmosphere contained breathable elements alongside compounds that shouldn't have been stable under normal conditions. 2 weeks after arrival, Alina stood in the ship's conference room as Captain Okafor addressed the assembled senior staff. "Our situation is this," Okafor began, his voice steady despite the dark circles under his eyes. "We are alone in an unknown dimension. Long-range sensors detect civilizations throughout this star system, but the physics here operate differently enough that our translation matrices are struggling. The Continuum vessels have retreated to the system's edge." Lieutenant Esposito, head of xenobiology, activated a holographic display showing the crystalline structures below. The formations house a species we're calling the Velari. Their biology is silicon-based, with what appears to be a distributed consciousness. More concerning, Dr. Tanaka added, is that our temporal instruments are detecting anomalies. Time itself flows differently here. It was Alina who first understood the true nature of the Velari. While attempting to establish communication, her neural interface synced briefly with their crystalline network. The experience left her unconscious for 36 hours. When she recovered, she called an emergency meeting. "They experience time backwards compared to us," she explained, her voice still hoarse. "From their perspective, we arrived at the end of a relationship that they haven't begun yet. They know our future interactions in complete detail, while we haven't experienced them. That's why they responded with hostility," Okafor realized. "They remember the end of our relationship, not its beginning." The Velari attack came 3 days later. Crystalline vessels emerged from the moon's surface, deploying weapons that manipulated probability itself. Where their energy beams struck the Remembrance's hull, quantum fields collapsed. Metal simultaneously existed and didn't exist, creating breaches that engineering crews couldn't repair because the damage occupied multiple potential states simultaneously. Conventional defense is impossible. Tactical Officer Raman reported as another section of the ship phased in and out of reality. Their weapons operate on principles our shields can't counteract. It was Alina who proposed the impossible strategy. "If they perceive time backwards, then they remember our future actions," she reasoned. "But what if we do something truly unpredictable, something no rational being would choose?" Captain Okafor's expression darkened. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "Move closer," she said simply. "Take us directly toward their main vessel." The bridge crew stared in disbelief as Okafor considered the proposal. Finally, he nodded to Commander Sato. "Take us in." Minimum safe distance to their command ship. As the Remembrance advanced toward the crystalline flagship, the Velari attack faltered. Their weapons, designed to intercept fleeing targets, struggled to target a vessel moving toward them. Using salvaged continuum technology and insights from the dimensional drive, Alina and Tanaka discovered another advantage. Human brainwave patterns created blind spots in the Velari's backwards perception, where the crystalline beings expected precise, algorithmic responses. Human intuition and emotional decision-making introduced chaotic elements they couldn't predict. "They can't see us clearly when we act on intuition rather than logic," Alina explained. "It's like temporal camouflage." Captain Okafor authorized a radical plan. A small team including Alina, Tanaka, and Security Chief Alvarez would infiltrate the Velari Central Consciousness Hub, not to destroy but to communicate. Using modified neural interfaces, they would attempt to synchronize with the Velari's temporal perspective. The infiltration team moved through crystalline corridors that reconfigured themselves constantly. For the Velari, these were pathways to the past. For humans, they led deeper into alien architecture that challenged fundamental understanding of spatial relationships. In the central chamber, they discovered a species trapped in predestination, beings who experienced their entire civilization's history in reverse. The Velari knew every outcome before its cause, yet were bound to follow the predetermined path of their existence. Elena initiated neural synchronization, experiencing time from both perspectives simultaneously. The disorientation nearly shattered her consciousness, but through the interface, she conveyed a truth the Velari had never encountered. "You see time as a completed story," she communicated through crystalline resonance. "But we experience it as unwritten, each moment a new creation." The concept of unpredictability, of true free will, cascaded through the Velari collective consciousness like a virus. Their crystalline structures vibrated with new frequencies as they processed a concept fundamentally alien to their existence: uncertainty. When the team returned to the Remembrance, the Velari attack had ceased. In its place, a new form of communication emerged, a tentative exchange between beings who experienced reality in fundamentally opposite ways. "They're offering an alliance," Elena reported to Captain Okafor, her eyes wide with wonder. "They've glimpsed our future together and seen something that changed them fundamentally." "What?" Okafor asked. Elena smiled. "They won't say. That would predetermine it. And they've discovered they prefer the uncertainty we've introduced to their existence." Humanity had made its first allies in exile, not through conquest or submission, but by offering a gift only humans could provide: the freedom of an unwritten future. The dimensional rift created by humanity's desperate escape did more than transport 7 ships across realities. It fundamentally altered the cosmic fabric itself, sending cascading effects outward through countless dimensions like ripples in a universal pond. In a gas giant orbiting a binary star system in the Andromeda Galaxy, a species of sentient atmospheric currents collectively known as the Zephyr had existed in perfect equilibrium for millions of years. Their consciousness flowed through carefully maintained wind patterns, their thoughts expressed through subtle shifts in molecular density. The Zephyr had no concept of sound as humans understood it, until the dimensional ripple passed through their atmosphere. The distortion introduced new vibrational patterns that the collective consciousness experienced as something entirely novel. Within days, the formerly silent species began composing what could only be described as music, complex harmonies that altered their very nature, transforming them from passive observers to active creators. Deeper in space, at the galactic core where radiation levels would instantly vaporize organic matter, ancient automated sentinels dormant for eons suddenly reactivated. These machines, remnants of a civilization that had transcended physical form millennia ago, detected changes in quantum constants that should have been immutable. Their programming, designed to watch for specific cosmic conditions, registered the dimensional disruption as the long-awaited signal. They began reconfiguring themselves for a purpose established before Earth's first multicellular organisms had evolved. Most significantly, in the void between galaxies where conventional matter is scarce, entities of pure consciousness stirred. These beings, the architects of the continuum, had evolved beyond physical constraints, existing as patterns in the underlying structure of reality itself. For billions of years, they had maintained what they considered perfect cosmic equilibrium, culling species that threatened to introduce unpredictable elements into the grand design. Now that equilibrium had been shattered. Impossible, the first architect communicated across the vast network connecting the collective. The humans didn't merely escape our judgment. They've altered fundamental constants. The ripple effects were already manifesting within the continuum itself. The rigid hierarchical structure that had governed thousands of species across multiple galaxies experienced unprecedented discord. Member civilizations that had surrendered individuality to join the collective consciousness began experiencing autonomous thoughts again. Ships disconnected from the central mind found themselves experiencing individuality for the first time in countless generations. In the dimensional space where the remembrance had emerged, fragments of continuum vessels attempted to reorganize. Without the guiding collective intelligence, their crews struggled with concepts long forgotten. Choice, uncertainty, free will. Some reacted with fear, attempting to re-establish connection with the continuum. Others experienced something like awakening. Commander Ixel, a being of crystalline neural networks who had served the continuum for 7 centuries, stood on the bridge of the damaged enforcement vessel Harmony of Purpose. The ship's sensors detected strange energy patterns emanating from across dimensional boundaries. Echoes of human influence rippling through realities never meant to intersect. We were wrong, Ixel told his confused crew, many experiencing individual consciousness for the first time. The humans weren't a contamination to be removed. They were a catalyst. Throughout the affected regions of space-time, species previously unaware of each other began detecting signs of the dimensional disruption. Ancient rivalries were forgotten as civilizations turned their attention to understanding what had occurred. Some reacted with fear, building new defenses against the unknown. Others responded with curiosity, developing technologies to explore the newly revealed dimensional pathways. In a pocket dimension where energy existed as sentient patterns of light, beings who had observed the multiverse in detached silence for eons began actively intervening in physical realities. They had recognized something the continuum had missed. The dimensional ripple wasn't random chaos. It followed patterns suggesting deliberate design at levels beyond conventional understanding. The universe itself seemed to be responding to humanity's presence, not as an infection to be contained, but as a missing element finally introduced into a complex equation. The hunters had become unwitting explorers, tracking human influence across realities they'd never imagined could exist. And with each discovery, a terrible truth became increasingly apparent. The continuum's attempt to remove humanity hadn't prevented cosmic disruption. It had directly caused the greatest transformation in the history of existence. The ripples continued to spread, touching dimensions and beings humanity couldn't begin to comprehend, all connected by a single event, the day humanity departed. 50 years passed aboard the Remembrance. The ship had transformed beyond recognition. Hydroponics gardens spiraled through expanded interior spaces, creating verdant forests where children born in space played beneath artificial sunlight. Crystal formations gifted by the Villari adorned public areas, their structures subtly altering local temporal flow to create pockets where time passed more slowly, perfect for meditation or extended research. Dr. Elena Reyes moved carefully through the central promenade, her body supported by a semi-mechanical exoskeleton. At 89, she had refused the more extensive life extension procedures available to senior personnel, accepting only the modifications necessary to continue her work. Her weathered face contrasted with the seamless technology augmenting her mobility. "Professor Okoye is waiting for you in the dimensional laboratory," her neural assistant informed her. Elena smiled. Eliza Okoye had been just 7 years old during the evacuation, a frightened child separated from her parents and assigned to the Remembrance based on her genetic profile. Now she led the ship's Dimensional Research Division, building upon theories that Dr. Chang had only begun to formulate before Earth's destruction. The Dimensional Laboratory occupied a specialized section of the ship where conventional physics could be locally altered. Inside, Okoye stood before a holographic display showing energy patterns that pulsed with complex rhythms. "We found something," Okoye said without preamble, her excitement palpable. A dimensional signature matching the Hope's drive frequency. Elena's breath caught. For decades, they had searched for signs of the other 6 ships, broadcasting signals across dimensional boundaries without response. "Where?" Elena whispered. "Not where," Okoye corrected. "When? It's emanating from a temporal fold approximately 23 years divergent from our timeline. They experience time differently after transit." Within hours, the news spread throughout the Remembrance. Children who had never known Earth gathered in community spaces as Captain Rivera, Okafor's successor after his death 15 years earlier, addressed the ship's population. "Today marks a new chapter in our journey," Rivera announced. "We are no longer alone." Okoye's team developed dimensional lighthouses, devices that broadcast across realities using principles learned from both the Velari and salvaged continuum technology. The Hope's answering signal came 3 days later, followed within weeks by responses from Perseverance, Genesis, and Legacy. The Dimensional Reunification Summit occurred 6 months later. The Remembrance's Great Assembly Hall hosted representatives from each recovered vessel. Elena, now using the mobility chair due to her weakening condition, watched faces she had never expected to see again. Each ship had undergone a unique evolution. The Genesis had encountered a gaseous species called the Maith, forming a symbiotic relationship where the non-corporeal beings flowed through specialized sections of the ship, enhancing human intuition and emotional perception. Captain Kwan of the Perseverance described discovering ancient ruins, suggesting humans had breached dimensions before. Relics with Earth symbols dating millions of years beyond human history. Most startling was the report from Commander Chen of the Legacy. Their ship had emerged in a reality where thought directly affected matter, producing humans with limited telekinetic abilities after generations of adaptation. As the representatives shared their experiences, Okoye mapped the dimensional coordinates of each vessel, creating a composite visualization that hovered above the assembly. The pattern that emerged caused a hush to fall over the gathered leaders. "It's a key," Elena said, her aged voice carrying in the silence. "Our scattered ships create a dimensional map." Dr. Tanaka, his once black hair now white, but his mind still sharp, studied the pattern with widening eyes. "Not just a map. A circuit. The 7 paths we carved through reality form a closed loop of energy." Okoye's calculations confirmed their observation. The seemingly random dispersal of human vessels had created a perfect dimensional circuit, a structure that appeared deliberate in its precision. In his final days, Dr. Chang had written of a theory too speculative to include in official records, that the dimensional drives might be tapping into patterns encoded in reality itself, following pathways that existed before human discovery. "We thought we were refugees," Elena told the assembled representatives, understanding finally dawning. "But we were catalysts for something greater. Our desperate escape didn't just save a fraction of humanity. It initiated a cosmic transformation that was always meant to occur." As the summit continued, reports arrived from scout ships of increasing continuum activity at the edges of explored space. The hunters were returning, but transformed, not as executioners, but as seekers trying to understand what humanity had unleashed. The gathering of humanity continued, their scattered fragments reconnecting across dimensions to form something greater than they had ever been on Earth, something the universe itself seemed to have been waiting for. 100 years after Earth's destruction, humanity had spread across multiple realities, establishing outposts in dimensions previously thought uninhabitable. The Remembrance, now more living entity than vessel, served as the central hub for an interdimensional alliance unprecedented in any known history. The Great Assembly Hall had been transformed for the centennial commemoration. Crystalline structures from the Velarde created temporal echoes, allowing glimpses of Earth as it once was. Gaseous math entities flowed through specially designed conduits, connecting the emotional experiences of all present. Children born 5 generations after departure played with technologies that manipulated local physics in ways that would have seemed magical to their ancestors. Eliza Okoye, now 87 and the acknowledged leader of humanity's scientific council, stood before the gathered representatives of all 7 original ships and their offspring colonies. Her face, lined with age, but eyes still fierce with intelligence, surveyed the assembly. 100 years ago today, she began, we believed we were witnessing the end of humanity. Instead, we were present for its rebirth. On display pedestals throughout the hall, artifacts from Earth, preserved books, art pieces, soil samples, connected the assembled crowd to their distant origin. Most present had never seen Earth except in historical records, yet all felt the gravity of the occasion.